Israel is not Israel. The modern state of Israel is not the same thing as biblical Israel. These are conflated all the time. The United Kingdom of Israel, the one ruled by Saul, David, and Solomon, lasted only about 120 years, roughly 3,000 years ago. And after King Solomon's death around 930 BC and under the harsh rule of his son Rehoboam, the kingdom made up of the 12 tribes split into two kingdoms. 10 tribes broke away and formed the northern kingdom of Israel, and the remaining 2 tribes of Benjamin and Judah became the southern kingdom of Judah. Eventually, those northern tribes were conquered by Assyria in 722 BC, and those 10 tribes were lost to history. Whenever you hear people mention the whole lost tribes of Israel, they're talking about that. This was 2,700 years ago, and then basically 100 years later, the southern kingdom was conquered by Babylon in 586 BC. This was what is called the Babylonian exile, when the Babylonians essentially evicted the people of the southern kingdom from their land and displaced them. And although 50 to 70 years later, a remnant of Judeans returned from exile and rebuilt Jerusalem and the temple, the ontological Israel, the identity of Israel, was gone. So when we're talking about Jews in the Bible, we're talking about the people from Judah, Judeans, right? They were part of Israel, but they are not the whole thing. This is a really important distinction that gets conflated all the time.
On the other side was the Jewish people, and out of the Jewish people came the 12 tribes and the faith known as Judeo-Christianity.
By the way, when a country turns against Israel, I mean, this is the way God orchestrated it. I, God, will bless those who bless the Jewish people.
That's right.
I, God, will curse those who curse the Jewish people.
Right, and this isn't just like a semantic argument, right? This was important because this fracture of Israel is what led to the first century messianic hope, the desire for the Messiah to come and reunite Israel into one thing. So by the time of Jesus, Israel no longer referred to a united anything. It didn't exist. All the tribes were gone. The biblical kingdom of Israel had ceased to exist centuries before the New Testament. But instead, this idea of Israel referred to a theological, messianic hope, a longing for restoration. And the hope was that the Messiah, God's chosen one, would come and set the world in order and throw off the yoke of the oppression of the Romans and reunite their people and retake their land. This leads to the claims that Jesus and his followers were making. They were claiming that Christ was, in fact, the long-awaited Messiah, that he was the one to reestablish Israel and defeat their enemies. But rather than doing it through warfare, his followers claimed that through his death and resurrection, he in fact did conquer and defeat their enemies. Not the Roman occupation in a physical sense, but the dark spiritual forces that control them. And they claimed that in Christ's ascension and at Pentecost, he did in fact reconstitute and reunite Israel, the people of God. Because Pentecost was where people from every nation heard the gospel in their own language, a direct reversal and inversion of the division at the Tower of Babel, reuniting the world and creating one people from many nations. And whether or not you believe all this is true, it kind of doesn't matter, right? It's besides the point, because this is meant to explain that for 1600-ish years or so, this is what Christians believed. You know, as St. Paul writes in his letter to the Church of Rome, not all who are descendants from Israel are Israel. And he writes to the Galatians, if you are Christ's, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to the promises. In other words, Israel, according to the Christians, for forever, Israel wasn't just a matter of blood or tribal descent, it was a theological identity rooted in Christ through his church. Historically, the church saw itself not as the replacement, but as the continuation and the true reunification of Israel. And this view lasted for basically 16 to 1700 years until these modern theological innovations like dispensationalism began to pop up. The apostles and the early church fathers would just be completely bewildered and confused at some of the language of the dispensationalists or the Christian Zionists. Because contrary to Christian tradition and history, evangelicals will often state that the modern state of Israel is the fulfillment of this Old Testament prophecy of the reunification of Israel.
This is something that no one has an explanation to unless you read Bible prophecy and you know that God promised the nation of Israel that at the very end, He will bring them back to their land.
Notice this, like what Christians have historically believed happened 2,000 years ago at Pentecost. The Evangelicals and Christian Zionists will claim that this was actually fulfilled 80 years ago with the establishment of the secular state of Israel. This is really weird historically, and this confusion, funny enough, is the result of a really simple, like a really stupid, simple error that Christian Zionists and dispensationalists make all the time, which is that in the aftermath of the Protestant Reformation in the 16th and 17th century, it became increasingly common for Protestants to collapse all of these terms into one thing, conflating metaphysical Israel with Jew, and using those terms interchangeably. So, with this out of the way, we could begin to talk about the origins of Christian Zionism in the aftermath of the Reformation.